Welcome to Survival Strategies for anyone who loves a gambling addict. Together, we'll learn to build a bubble around ourselves where peace, joy, serenity, and financial security can exist, regardless of what our gamblers choose to do and the chaos they create. This podcast is intended for mature audiences and includes topics and language that may not be suitable for young children. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Jodi, and I am your podcast host. It seemed reasonable that I begin this journey with my own personal story to give my listeners an idea of my background and where I come from. I want to start by saying that my husband, who is the gambler in my life, is fully supportive of this endeavor. I was shocked at how supportive he was. When I sat down to tell him of my idea to put our story out to the world, he looked at me and said, "It is what it is. And I'm not afraid for you to tell our story." And that is an indication of a recovery program in practice. I've been married for almost 37 years to my husband. Let's talk about how my husband gambled. He started gambling in his mid to late 20s. As he describes it, it was a short time in gambling addiction compared to other people. He gambled on sports exclusively with a bookie. Back then, there were no cell phones, there was no internet. If you wanted to gamble and you weren't in Las Vegas, you were doing it illegally. It would take a long time for me to go into all of his escapades, but I will tell you, he was married, he had 2 small children, and he was gambling 1.5 times his annual income on a weekly basis. He would gamble on multiple games at a time. And even during the birth of his children, both born on Super Bowl Sunday, he had huge wagers that distracted him from the moment. And as I sit back and think about the mother of his children in the hospital giving birth to their child and not being a priority over a Super Bowl game, it's no surprise that that marriage ended in divorce. His children were 2 and 4. When she left, he reached out immediately to GA. And the members of the GA in Omaha were absolute angels. They rallied around him immediately. He went to GA meetings while he was in Iowa and Omaha. But eventually, he moved to Colorado. When he moved to Colorado, he stopped going to meetings. We met about a year or 2 after he moved to Colorado. I met my husband at a toga party. He's from the Midwest, so he doesn't know what a toga is. He's wearing a red pillowcase with his legs holes cut out the bottom and rainbow suspenders before rainbow was a thing, and his name written across his rear end. He was the life of the party. And when I reflect on that day, I think about the fact that he had a neon sign on his head saying, "I'll take responsibility for nothing." And I had a neon sign on my head saying, "I'll take responsibility for everything." And from that moment on, we made an absolutely amazing, catastrophic couple. We went on our first date 1 week after we met. And as we were having dinner, he confessed that he had a gambling problem and he was recovered. His father was holding on to $75,000. He paid cash for the meal, which was impressive to me. And I learned that he was in the car business. Within 6 weeks, we were talking marriage. And gosh, when I look back on that with my own daughters, I think, oh Lord, that's not a good idea under the best of circumstances. but that's what we did. Within 2 months, I was meeting his family. We drove to Iowa. It was the holidays. And I would say that I really didn't connect to any of his family. There was a distance there, and I didn't fully know why, but because I'd never met a boyfriend's family before or a fiance's family before, I didn't know what to expect. After we met his family and we started really planning our wedding, I noticed that he was becoming withdrawn and distant. I thought it was just wedding nerves and that things would resolve after the wedding. Our entire wedding was videotaped, and we don't watch our wedding very often, primarily because it is not a reflection of love and joy between two people. The number of times he rolls his eyes during the ceremony is it, it- it's disturbing. He told me later that he was paralyzed with fear that someone in his family was going to say something that I was going to find absolutely distasteful. We didn't have any money to go on a honeymoon. We wound up painting a condo on our honeymoon so that we could afford rent. Within a couple months of our wedding, John was talking about buying a house. He wanted to buy a house. Now, let me repeat, we couldn't afford our rent. And we were going to look at houses at new housing developments. And there was no question we could not afford these houses. We didn't even have jobs. And again, at 23 years old, I thought, well, is this normal? Is this what you do? Do you jump out? Do you buy a house? Does he have the money? He told me he had $75,000. So maybe this is a reasonable thing. We sat down with a mortgage broker and we filled out all the paperwork. And come to find out that we couldn't purchase a lot because my husband had filed bankruptcy. I did not know this was part of the deal. And I had to be told by a mortgage broker. It was then that I also found out that his father did not have $75,000 he was holding for my husband. It was probably quite the other way that he owed his dad $75,000. So the landscape of our financial future changed overnight. Okay, I can deal with this. We'll figure it out. We ended up finding a house. Now, this was 1989. There was quite a housing crisis. There were lots of houses in foreclosure, and we were able to buy a house on an assumable loan. What that means is if you have a pulse, they will let you buy a house at the rate and the loan terms that the previous owner agreed to. We purchased a house at an astronomical interest rate and we moved in. I thought, well, he's got everything he wants, but he's still distant. And there was absolutely part of my gut that kept saying, "Ugh, this isn't right. And if it is right, it doesn't feel good. This isn't what I thought marriage would be about." This situation with my husband's ex-wife could easily be described as volatile and angry. And in my naive space, I couldn't understand why she appeared to be so unreasonable. God, if I could go back, because she'd been through it. She knew what she was dealing with, but I was young. I lacked the knowledge, I lacked the wisdom, and I grabbed hold of this attitude that she was unreasonable and my husband was the victim. His parents came to visit and he wouldn't take time off from work to even come home early and have a dinner with them. And I absolutely felt strange about this. Why wouldn't you take some time off? Why wouldn't you spend some time with your parents? I lost my dad when I was 11, what I wouldn't give to be able to sit at a table and have dinner with my dad. But I was left home to entertain his parents. And we were having dinner, the three of us. I remember it well. It's embedded in the fiber of my being. It was lasagna. And his parents kept talking about his first wife. And the name of his first wife was not the wife I was aware of. And finally I stopped him and I said, "Well, you mean his ex-wife, right?" And they said, "No, we mean his first wife and his first child." And it was in that moment that I realized that I was not my husband's second wife. I was his third wife. He didn't have two children, he had three children. I felt tricked. I felt betrayed. I felt stupid. I wondered why no one had ever said anything to me before we got married. And it might be clicking for you that that was one of the things he was afraid someone was going to say at our wedding. I confronted him later that night. It never occurred to him that the truth would come out. He, of course, said that the reason he lied and withheld the information was because he was afraid if I knew, I wouldn't marry him. All bullshit. He didn't want to face the consequences of having lied. It was in that moment that I realized I was out of my depth. Clearly, we have a problem here. And the only thing I could think of was, here is a man who told me he was a recovered gambler. I know he went to GA several years ago. I know he hasn't been to GA since. Let's use this as a resource. We're going to start going back to GA and Gam-Anon meetings. And he was on board with that. It wasn't a hard sell. I went to my first Gam-Anon meeting. I went through the 20 questions and the sharing time came around to me, and I thanked them for sharing the 20 questions. And in all honesty and seriousness, I looked at them and I said, it's really important that I have the 20 answers, because my husband and I are going to try to start having a family in 90 days, and I need to have this fixed in 90 days. And I remember the woman at the end of the table who spoke the most brutal truth, which was, I suggest you put a hold on that child unless you want to be the third ex-wife looking for a child support check. And I am going to tell you, I was so pissed off. I thought, she doesn't know me. She doesn't know my husband. She doesn't know how good I am at solving problems. Quite frankly, I didn't like what they were telling me. I didn't like that they were telling me that I had to shore up the finances, that I needed to take control of where the money was going. I remember leaving that meeting and crying all the way home, and doing that every week. And I came to the realization, hey, maybe this isn't a gambling or addiction issue. Maybe this is a marriage issue. So I sought out a marriage counselor, someone who had all the degrees on their wall that could help us navigate these things that were happening that were probably just average, normal marriage things. And I will tell you, and my husband will confirm, that he had that marriage counselor wrapped around his little finger within 5 minutes of going into that room. Look, gamblers are charismatic people. They're likable. And she really liked him. By the end of our first session, she had told me, hey, no wonder you're having intimacy issues. No one wants to sleep with their mother. Give him back all the finances. Take off the reins. Let him be the man of the house. Okay, so I've got a Gam-Anon room over here saying, hey, you better shore up those finances. You better get his name off the accounts. You better lock away your checkbook. Look, you got an issue here. And on the other hand, I have this person who has all of this education telling me all I need to let him do is be the man of the house. And I decided to do what the highly degreed individual with the office in a nice building told me to do. So we moved forward. We got pregnant. We are in the process of renovating our house while I'm pregnant. And when I say renovating, I'm not sure there was too much that didn't get touched, and it was exhausting. My husband had a lack of contentment, this restless discontent. And I thought, well, maybe, if we lay tile through the whole house and we paint and we build a divider and we strip off all this awful stuff going on in this bedroom and make a spare bedroom and put in new flooring for the nursery. Maybe if we do all of that, maybe then he'll be content. And we did. And I will just tell you, it was an exhausting, exhausting time. We were focused on these renovations, and looking back on it now, I think, my God, what was I thinking? I went to my doctor's appointment and was told by the doctor, hey, you're going to have a baby today. I went to the front desk and called my husband because, again, no cell phones. Called him at his office and said, hey, we're going to have a baby today. And his response was, I've got work to do. I've got things I've got to take care of here. You'll have to drive yourself home, get your bag, and I'll meet you at the hospital. Not the hallmark moment I had in my mind. When I think about people who deal with postpartum depression, I think how much of that is just this issue between husband and wife that doesn't feel right going into the birth of a child. He meets me at the hospital and they start the induction process. There is no baby in by 10 o'clock at night. We stay overnight and I go into labor the next morning. It's slow. And he decides rather than sitting with me, he's going to go get breakfast off site of the hospital, get in his car and go to a diner. When he came back, our son was born maybe an hour later. He wasn't there. He wasn't present. It wasn't a priority. Gosh, that sounds familiar and concerning. We had our son on Thursday. We got home from the hospital on Friday, and my husband went back to work on Monday. I know that this is not a reflection of his love for our son, but the engagement just wasn't there. My husband was working for a car dealership. And it was very common back then for car dealerships to give their car salesmen demos. My husband was driving a new Ford truck, and I believed it was a demo. Things were really tight. I had a vehicle that was a little bit of a clown car. It was a Festiva, 2-door. I had to pull my child out of the hatch, and he drove a nice new truck. But it was a demo, so it was okay. We had made the decision that I was going to be a stay-at-home mom. I had saved quite a bit of money. I had committed to do whatever I needed to do to make that as feasible for us as possible. Our son had problems eating and wound up having to have formula that cost $32 a can back in 1992. It was burdensome. And I remember one night sitting on the floor cutting coupons. Yes, back in the day, there was the actual act of grabbing a pair of scissors, flipping through the ad in the paper, and cutting the coupon. And he came home from work and he's sitting in a chair next to me as I'm cutting these coupons. And we're talking about our finances, which are pitiful. And he said to me, I think the problem is you're just not clipping enough coupons. And I remember sitting on the floor and thinking, oh my God, he's right. I'm not doing enough. I need to be clipping more coupons. I need to be doing something. This is all my fault. Month or two goes by, and I get a call from someone asking for my husband's father. And I'm thinking, what in the hell would they be asking for him here for? And the gentleman says, well, I'm from the car loan place, and I need to talk to John's father about this car loan. And I'm thinking, what car loan? When John gets home, I am absolutely baffled. I tell him about the phone call. And the only way I can describe his response is Academy Award winning. He immediately went into a tirade about how the people in the office were so incompetent. And when they put the paperwork through on his demo. They must have just went in and grabbed the first person with his last name that they could find. And since his parents bought a car there, they pulled the wrong person. And this is not the first time they've done that. And he's going to get a hold of the owner of the store. And by God, this needs to stop. And I thought, oh, okay. This seems pretty legitimate. Shortly after that, my husband is on the phone with his mom and dad, a weekly call. I'm on the other line. Again, no cell phones. So I'm listening to the call on the other line, and I hear my husband tell his dad he has a white truck. His truck is green. Why on earth would you lie about the color of a vehicle? What a stupid thing to lie about. And I remember getting off the phone with him and saying, hey, I just need you to know that I'm done with all the lies. And the next time you lie, I'm going to call you on it. And I don't care who's listening. So you better be careful. About a month and a half later, I'm at home on a Saturday. The doorbell rings, and it's the postman. And he says, ma'am, I noticed you were home and wanted to know if you'd like your mail today. What a strange question. Of course. Of course I'd like my mail today. Isn't that what you do? And he said, well, actually, I've been taking all of your mail to your P.O. box where it was forwarded to over a year ago. Huh. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, am I stupid? Because guess what? I knew I hadn't seen a bank statement in over a year. Wait a minute. I hadn't gotten the mail in over a year. My husband would come home and the first thing he'd ask me is, hey, did you go get the mail? And if I said yes, he'd keep what he picked up from the P.O. box until tomorrow. If I said no, he'd say, I'll go check. And he'd bring in the mail that he picked up at the P.O. box that he wanted me to see. Yeah, that was painful. In the mail that the postman gave me was a payment book for a truck in his dad's name. That's how it worked back then. The finance company would send you a payment book for the full year. There were 12 coupons, and you would put the coupon in the envelope with the check and mail in your payment. When he came home, he was caught. It came to light that he had forged his dad's name on the paperwork. And this whole time, he had been making a payment on a truck that we couldn't afford. He'd been making a payment on insurance that we couldn't afford. He'd been putting gas in a vehicle that we couldn't afford. And his response to me was, oh, I'm so relieved that this is out in the open. I feel like a weight's been lifted. Well, you do ya? Because whatever weight you've taken off your shoulders, you've sure as hell put on mine. I insisted that we call his dad for a level of accountability. When he told his dad what happened, I was sure that there would be some come to Jesus moment. And instead, his dad said, well, I don't really blame John. It's really the Catholics' fault that we have gambling because they do bingo. Yep, for sure. I couldn't believe that he was immediately absolved of any responsibility. Now, at this point, I'm thinking, well, why is all of this happening? Are you gambling? Are you gambling? He wasn't gambling. So if he's not gambling, why is all of this happening? And there was no answer. Is it because I'm not a good enough wife? Is it because we don't have a good enough family? Is it because I don't keep a clean enough house? Is it because we don't live in the right neighborhood? I am searching for the why. At that point, we do a deep dive into our finances and we have what's called a pressure relief in the GA world. I won't go into depth into what that means because we'll have an episode dedicated to the financial accountability where we'll go into that. But just for reference, it's where the gambler and the spouse meet with other members of GA and Gamanon and they dive into pressures and financial accountability. So we do that. And really, what comes out of that pressure relief is we can't afford to live here. There has been such debt amassed because I was under the impression that we had the money to do the things that we were doing. I didn't know loans were being taken out. I didn't know we were paying for a car. I didn't know that bills weren't getting paid so that household renovations could be made to satisfy this discontent. So we put the house on the market and we moved. The housing market was going like gangbusters. And as it turns out, the reward for creating a situation where you have to move, you've lied to your spouse and you have to move because of debt that you cannot get out from under, was to buy a bigger and better home. So, congratulations, you're moving into a bigger and better home. We move into the house, and within a month, we got to have a party. We're going to have a party. We're going to have the best party. We're going to invite everybody we know. We're going to have a keg. We're going to have a friend of ours come and do barbecue out in the front yard. We're going to have a party. Well, guess what? We don't even have furniture in our house. So we got to get furniture. He takes a loan out from a guy he works with so that we can buy furniture. I knew what he was doing. I felt powerless to say no because I was a stay-at-home mom. I don't contribute. I'm the reason we're in this mess. I want him to be happy. So guess what? We're going to have a party. Baby 2 arrives, and my husband and I have an existence similar to roommates. His immaturity is really showing. I remember him standing on the landing with our daughter, who was maybe 9 months old, maybe. And he's telling her to get away from the stairs. And I'll tell you what, she was yelling right back at him. She wasn't moving. And the louder she screamed, the louder he screamed. And I looked out the door of the bedroom and I thought, my God, who's the child here? And the discontent started all over again. We must finish the basement. We must redo all the flooring in the house. I feel really responsible. I'm working from home. I've got a business from home. I'm working from 8 o'clock at night to 2 in the morning, home all day with the kids, but it doesn't feel like it's enough. The holidays were always the worst. Never money to buy Christmas gifts. We were those people who were out on the 23rd and 24th buying Christmas gifts, never getting what we really wanted to get anybody because that shit's gone. And when you experience that over and over and over again, it's easy to say, well, this is a money problem. This is a budget problem. This is a finance problem. The common phrase my husband would use, and I swear to you, I've heard it 100 times over the course of our marriage. Don't worry, it'll all work out. It'll all work out. Don't worry. Yeah, let me assure you, nothing just works out. Things get tight again. We have another sit-down meeting with the GA and Gam-Anon room. I'm wondering what else he needs to do something else. And they looked at me and said, what more can he do? He's working 6 days a week, 10 to 14 hours a day. What more is he going to do? So he suggests that we refi our house. Equity has grown so fast we can refi our house and pay these bills. Okay, let's do that. I get a phone call from the mortgage person that we have contacted to refi our house. And he says, hey, suggestion to you and your husband is that you make some payments on time for a while before you try to refi. And I'm standing there on the phone going, what do you mean make payments on time? He said, yeah, you guys don't make your payments on time. Well, this is the first I've heard of it. And when my husband gets home, I come to understand that when we sit down and we do bills, I put it in an envelope. We put the stamp on it and I give it to him to put in the mail on his way to work. He's not putting it in the mail. We've got a year worth of history of late pays on our mortgage. And I remember asking him, why? What is it that's making you so restless? What is it that's causing this problem? And he says, well, I just want us to have the very best of everything. Sounds grandiose. We have a beautiful house. We've got beautiful, healthy children. We've got wonderful friends. What does the house in your head, what does the material belongings in your head look like? You got to share it with me because I think what we have is pretty great. Some of the bills that he wasn't sending was his child support. Well, no wonder his ex was furious all the time. No wonder. And during that conversation, I heard things like, well, you knew when I wasn't going to be sending those bills. I told you. I told you I was going to hold on to it. I told you we didn't have the money to pay for it. No, 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 you did not. Today we call that gaslighting. Back then we called it guilt induction. Look, we've been going to meetings for years. I know he's not gambling to the degree that you can know anything. So what the hell is the problem? Why do we keep having the lying and the manipulation and the financial insecurity? Why? I'm going to end part one with this recollection. We are in our bedroom and he is sitting on the end of our bed and he's looking up to our TV on the wall and he is watching a movie about a compulsive gambler who gets into legal trouble. And his punishment from the judge is to coach a little league softball team for the town. And at the end of this movie, you have come to love the compulsive gambler. He's doing such a good thing. The team is thriving. All the kids are doing much better. But gosh, they're in a financial pickle. And this team, if they don't make some money, if they don't have some money, they're not, either they're not going to get to go to the playoffs or something bad is going to happen. So the main character, played by Keanu Reeves, places one last bet. And he ends up betting on a team that he knows is going to lose. And at the end of the movie, the team wins. Everybody's cheering, everybody's happy, life is good. And my husband is sitting at the end of the bed watching the end of this movie, and he is delighted. The color in his face says he is excited. He is there. He is feeling it. And he looks at me and he says, oh my God, this reminds me of the most exciting day of my life. Oh, does it now? Tell me more. Yeah, I had had a really good day of gambling and went into my job the next day and was telling everyone I worked with to contact my bookie and place a bet for this winning team. This team that he knew was going to win. He was going to be the big shot. He was going to be the one that told all of his workmates how to win money. And when they won their money tonight, that he was going to be the big guy. He was going to be grandiose. Well, everyone that he recommended to call his bookie and place a bet on the team he was confident was going to win did just that. And by the time he got on the phone to call his bookie's response was, hey, I've already taken too many bets on that side. If you want to place a bet today, you're going to have to place it on the team you believe is going to lose. And so he did. It wasn't a $10 bet. It wasn't a $100 bet. It wasn't even a $1,000 bet. He placed a bet for thousands of dollars on a team that commonsensically he knew was going to lose. And he looked at me and said, that was the most exciting 3 hours of. And I stood in our bedroom thinking, oh shit, we have a problem, because he's been attending GA for years and he still thinks this was the most exciting 3 hours of his life. It's not our marriage. It's not the birth of our children. It's The day he placed a bet on a team he knew would lose and he lost? That's sick. And I didn't have the answer for why. Why would someone who's not gambling anymore still reflect on that kind of behavior with such delight? It was disturbing and it felt hopeless. And I didn't have the answers. Nothing made sense. Continue the story in the second part, episode 2. I hope you'll join me. You have been listening to Survival Strategies for Anyone Who Loves a Gambling Addict, a production of BoundaryWise Consulting. Receive an alert when our next episode airs by following or subscribing on your podcast platform. The thoughts, opinions, and observations of the host are drawn from over 35 years of lived experience, involvement in state and local organizations, and industry awareness, as well as meaningful connections with thousands of spouses, parents, children, siblings, and friends whose lives were impacted by someone else's gambling. You can schedule an appointment with Jodi or learn more about our workshops and other services by emailing Jodi, Jodi, at boundarywiseconsulting.com. Thanks for listening.